May we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Bettine.
Here.
Councilor Brookie. Councilor White.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Here.
Mayor Marbury.
Here. And I'd like to begin this evening with our youth engagement. And so one of our participants is here tonight. So would you please come to the podium and introduce yourself and tell the audience your name and what board that you are on.
Hi, I'm Harry Lesage. I'm on the Airport Commission Board, and I joined the MIAC program to make an impact in our community.
Well, thank you, Harry. We're so happy that you're here. Let's give him a round of applause. And he's going to go home and do his homework. So we have a proclamation tonight, but this is Constitution Week. And I'm going to call up Nancy Carter to come to the podium with me. Nancy is a regent of the Sarah Platt Decker National Society of Daughters of the American Revolution. Constitution Week, whereas September 17th, 2018 marks the 251st anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize this magnificent document and the anniversary of its creation. And whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize the patriotic celebration which will commemorate the occasion, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States designating September 17 through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, Sweetie Marbury, Mayor of Durango, Colorado, do proclaim September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. And Nancy, would you like to say a few words?
I'd like to invite all of you, if you have not already done so, to go to the Durango Library where we have an exhibit. Also, I don't know if you've already got, because I haven't been out for a while, the banner, we flag banner over Santa Rita Park to look at that. And we also have exhibits in Pagosa Springs across from the Methodist Church and in Bayfield and Ignacio. So we hope we have got everyone covered and you'll take the chance to go and visit them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I see a few more of the Mayor's Youth Engagement teenagers here tonight. So if you will come to the podium and introduce yourself and tell the council and the audience your name and what board you're on.
I'm Sophia Bader, and I'm the youth representative on the Durango Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
I'm Ruby Ward, and I'm on the multimodal board.
I'm Alma Wolf, and I am a co-chair of the Maine MIAC board.
And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. And they are a very busy group of involved teenagers at their high schools as well as with the engagement program. So thank you, ladies, for coming. We're moving on to a presentation by Kathy Metz on the proposed repairs to the Animas River Trail.
Good evening, Mayor Marbury and members of the City Council. We wanted to come to you this evening to give you an update on repairs to our Animas River Trail. You might know that the Animas River Trail is the most highly utilized single recreation amenity provided by the City of Durango. So it's a big asset to our community, and we wanted to bring you an update on some repairs that we'd like to complete in 2018 and 2019. In 2018, we would like to repair the section of the Animas River Trail between Whitewater Park and Albertsons. This is a repair of the existing asphalt section of trail. And what we intend to do is remove those damaged sections of the trail and replace the base and replace the asphalt with more asphalt until the whole trail can be reconstructed with our current standard of concrete, but that's several years out. And we know the trail is so highly utilized, we'd like to address those sections. And then we'll also be doing a crack fill of any crack that's larger than 1.25 inches in width. That section of trail between the Whitewater Park and Albertsons is about 3,120 linear feet. And that is planned to be completed in 2018. The second project in 2018 is near Rank Park over to Alamo Drive. This is a big spur connection for the high school. And we estimate that will be about $20,000. The earlier project that I mentioned from Whitewater Park to Albertsons was $80,000. So we plan to come to the City Council for an additional appropriation out of the 2015 half-cent fund on the October 2nd meeting. And so just wanted to give you all a heads up about that and talk to you about our plan to address these older sections of the Animas River Trail that are asphalt. And in 2019, we have also 2 repair projects that we're going to be proposing in the 2019 budget, but we wanted to bring it all together for the council for clarity. This first section is from Rank Park behind the high school north up to Memorial Park and providing links to the fairgrounds as well as the recreation center. It's about 5,280 linear feet, so much longer length, and we're estimating that would be $140,000. The fish hatchery has bid out the repair of their spring water line, and that bid came in too high for them to complete this year. So they do intend to pursue that next year. That's why we need to wait and let them do that repair so we don't have to address that drainage issue that currently is associated with the fish hatchery and their spring water. The second project in 2019 that would be included in the budget for next year is a $70,000 project to go on the north end of Cundiff Park to Santa Rita Park. And this again is asphalt. We would again be just removing those sections and replacing with asphalt. It's about 2,700 linear feet. So that will be in the budget for 2019, a total of $210,000 to give you an idea of that project that would be slated for 2019. The other thing that we wanted to let you know is that we're currently in design for the redevelopment. So this is a removal of the entire asphalt section, replacement with our current standard of concrete with lighting. That would be from Iris Park, that is near River City Hall, all the way north to the swinging bridge, which is at the north end of Riverfront Park. That $800,000 has already been appropriated by the City Council, and it's about 1,215 linear feet. We anticipate that the construction will occur actually in 2019 for this project because of some design considerations we're currently considering with the structural engineer. The other project that I wanted to make sure the council is aware of is we're currently out to bid for the section of the Animas River Trail North. That is a redevelopment and creation of a new section of the trail linking Animas City Park all the way up to Oxbow Park and Preserve. This is over 5,000 linear feet. You might remember that we've already appropriated about $4 million for this project. Included in that $4 million is a $1.4 million grant from Great Outdoors Colorado, and we are asking for an appropriation in 2019 for an additional $1.9 million to complete this reach of the trail. So just wanted to remind the council that that's also occurring, in the capital project for this year and next year. So that's all the projects that we had for now, and just wanted to provide the council with an update of those items.
Would you, for the clarity of the community, explain the Oxbow, which 2015, is it coming out of 2015? Or
Yes, all of these projects that we just described will be coming out of the 2015 half-cent sales tax for the development of the Animas River Trail.
And we are so grateful that the citizens voted for that reauthorization. So this connection, because down Animas View Drive, there are no sidewalks, there's no safety features, and this will connect Animas View Drive into the rest of our community in a very safe way for women with strollers and bicyclers and pedestrians. So when I first got on council with former Mayor White, that was one of the big issues, was this exact story. So thank you so much for it finally happening.
Yes, we're very excited about it, and we get a lot of positive feedback from our residents on Adams View Drive
can
about the
imagine.
connection up to their neighborhood.
Right, thank you. With that, we're moving into a review of the consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to allow the city council by a single motion to approve matters that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered under agenda item number 6. Ms. Phillips?
Item 4.1 and 4.2 are approval of minutes. 4.1, the special meeting of August 28, 2018, and 4.2, the study session of August 28, 2018. 4.3 through 4.5 are discussion and possible action items. 4.3 concerns Resolution R 2018-36, opposing Amendment 74, an attempt to amend the Colorado Constitution to drastically limit state and local government services at high cost to taxpayers. 4.4 concerns Resolution R 2018-37, supporting the creation of a Colorado specialty license plate for Mesa Verde National Park. 4.5 concerns Resolution R 2018-38, authorizing an additional capital improvement project and an additional appropriation in the Water Fund, Water Capital Projects Fund, the Sewer Fund, and the Sewer Capital Projects Fund for design and bid preparations for the Utilities Administration Building at the Santa Rita Water Reclamation Facility. Item 4.6 and 4.7 are final approval of ordinances. 4.6 is Ordinance O 2018-20, approving the annexation and initial zoning for the Basin Co-op addition to the City of Durango and declaring an effective date. And item 4.7 is Ordinance O 2018-21, amending and repealing certain sections of Article 7 of Chapter 21 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Durango concerning smoking in public places and declaring an effective date.
Thank you very much. Would any of the city councilors want to remove an item?
I'd like to remove item 4.3.
4.3, anyone else? With that, I'll look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 4.3.
I'll second.
A roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Yes.
Councilor Bettine,
Yes.
Councilor White,
Yes.
and Mayor Marbury.
Yes. Councilor White?
Item 4.3 deals with a very significant proposal on the state ballot. And I was wondering if we could have commentary either from the manager or the attorney, possibly even a reading of it. I mean, there are a lot of whereas clauses, but they say it all.
I'd be happy to read it, and then if there's questions, I could provide clarification, and then the council can take its action if that meets your
That would be great.
summary. Okay, so this is Resolution R 2018-36, a resolution opposing Amendment 74, an attempt to amend the Colorado Constitution to drastically limit state and local government services at a high cost to taxpayers. Whereas local government services are essential to the citizens of the city of Durango, and whereas Amendment 74, formerly Initiative Number 108, has been written by certain out-of-state corporate interests to change the text of the Colorado Constitution, Article 2, Section 15, which dates back to 1876 and threatens basic governmental services. And whereas Amendment 74 declares that any state or local government law or regulation that reduces the fair market value of a private parcel is subject to just compensation. And whereas, while Amendment 74 is shrouded in simple language, it has far-reaching and complicated impacts. And whereas, my iPad just went crazy. And whereas, under the
Current?
current, got it, Colorado Constitution, a property owner already has the right to seek compensation from state or local governments. And whereas Amendment 74 would expand this well-established concept by requiring the government, i.e. the taxpayers, to compensate private property owners for virtually any decrease whatsoever in fair market value of their property traceable to any governmental law or regulation. And whereas Amendment 74 would create uncertainty because it is not clear what the language actually means or how it can be applied. And whereas Amendment 74 would severely limit the ability of Colorado state and local governments to do anything that might indirectly, unintentionally, or minimally affect the fair market value of any private property. And whereas Amendment 74 would drastically diminish the ability of our state and local governments to adopt, let alone attempt to enforce, reasonable regulations, limitations, and restrictions upon private property. And whereas Amendment 74 would place laws, ordinances, and regulations designed to protect public health and safety, the environment, our natural resources, public infrastructure, and other public resources in jeopardy. And whereas Amendment 74 would directly impact zoning, density limitations, and plan development. And whereas Amendment 74 would make inherently dangerous or environmentally damaging activities too costly to attempt to limit or regulate, even in the interest of the public. And whereas any arguable impact upon fair market value, however reasonable or justified or minimal or incidental or temporary, resulting from state or local government action could trigger a claim for the taxpayer to pay. And whereas governments would be vulnerable to lawsuits for almost every decision to regulate or not to regulate, making regular government functions prohibitively expensive for the taxpayer. And whereas similar efforts have been attempted and defeated in other states, such as the states of Washington and Oregon. And whereas the fiscal impact for similar language in Washington was estimated at $2 billion for state agencies and $1.5 billion for local governments over the first 6 years. And whereas individuals filed billions of dollars in claims in Oregon before the residents repealed the Takings Initiative 3 years after its passage. Therefore, be it resolved, the City Council of the City of Durango opposes Amendment 74 and strongly urges a vote of no on this ballot question.
Thank you. I think it was absolutely worthwhile to have that resolution read in public and all of the really dangerous possibilities that it creates. And I urge citizens to pay very close attention to the November ballot. There are, I believe, 13 state initiatives and one very important one for the city of Durango, which we'll probably mention during council reports later. But it's in addition to all of the races for public office that are on the ballot. This is a very important election. Pay attention and vote, please. Thank you.
And with that, I'll look for a motion.
A motion to approve Resolution R 2018-36.
In a second.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor Bettine?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes. And we're moving into public participation while the city manager gets the sign-in sheets. I want to make sure that everyone has signed in. If you'd like to talk during public participation, this is the time you need to sign in. Or if you're here for a public hearing, and we have several of those tonight, please be sure and sign in. Public participation. This section of the agenda is set aside for the public to provide comments or ask questions regarding items that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. City Council will not respond to questions from the dais. Citizens should address their comments directly to the City Council. Citizens wishing to speak during this section of the agenda shall sign in prior to the start of the meeting, identifying their name and address on the form provided at the meeting. Citizens will be called individually by name by the mayor to come to the podium to address the City Council. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. The city manager will signal 30 seconds remaining by raising his hand. Any audio-visual materials must be provided to the city clerk on or before noon of the day of the meeting. Okay, let's start with Jim Boland.
Did Judy come up with me? or-
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jim Boland from the Kiwanis Club, and I'm co-chair of the Pancake Day.
Judy Mahalski, also co-chair. It needs two of us to get it done.
So this Thursday is our Pancake Day. It's our annual one. It's our 63rd, so I think we're probably the longest running fundraising event, I think, in the county. So it's an all-day event, 7 to 7. We have pancakes, eggs, ham, orange juice, blueberries. We also have gluten-free pancakes. So for the people that are gluten-free, they can still enjoy pancakes with us. All our money that we raise from this stays in the community. We're a totally volunteer organization, so the only costs we have are the supplies, and our very generous vendors have, give us a great discount. So our costs are real low, our margins are good. Last year we raised $20,000 between the pancake tickets. We also have a silent auction, and you can come and over to the right side will be the table with all kinds of different items and things, and we were able to raise $5,000 with that, and approximately $14,000 to $15,000 for our pancakes. So that's been a very valuable addition to our Pancake Day. I forgot, I had a large poster, 2 by 3 foot one, but it was in my other car, so I don't have it with me. But this is we've been circulating these all over the city and everything, so you've probably seen this in motels and retail stores and so forth. And I wanted to point out the back of it, which you can't really see, but it shows 21 charities that we have donated to with our funds, and there's other ones, but that's all we can list in the back. But it's all local. Everything stays local, and we hope to see everybody there this Thursday. I do have pancake tickets. If anyone wants.
Thank you very much.
If we've got a few more minutes, I know you're supposed to raise your hand if you've got 30 seconds left. I would like to read some of the beneficiaries, because I think it's so important that people know that 100% of the proceeds, whatever we take in, goes immediately back into the community, and the emphasis is on children or kids. So I want you to know that when you buy tickets, it's really benefiting the Adaptive Sports Association, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Boys and Girls Club, the After Prom group at the high school,
Judy, read faster.
Dollywood Reading Program, if he raises his hand, I'll quit in the middle. Durango High School Key Club, Durango Elementary Schools we gave to their health department, Durango Safe House, Durango Youth Soccer, Fort Lewis College Softball Team, Hospice of Mercy, La Plata Family Center, La Plata Youth Baseball, La Plata Youth Services, Manna Soup Kitchen, Project Merry Christmas, Salute to Veterans, Southwest Junior Rolling Lobels, the 100 Club of Durango, and Tri-County Head Start, and the Women's Resource Center. Thank you very much for supporting us.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Skaggs. Alan Skaggs? Mr. Skaggs? Okay. Catherine, I'm going to mispronounce it, Catherine Coppin? Sorry. And if Miss... Okay, thank you. And if Mr. Skaggs comes in, then please be sure and let me know that.
How are you tonight?
Fine, thank you.
Good. I was here a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to continue my conversation a little bit with you about the homeless situation. I do homeless outreach. I'm out there every day, well, not Sundays, but I'm out there 6 days a week working with the homeless. And I'm really concerned about where the city stands on the situation for how they can obtain a place to sleep. There obviously isn't enough room at the shelter, and we've come to a conclusion that you're going to uphold the anti-camping ban, which I understand. And so I'm here to appeal to you to change your position in some way to be able to provide a place for the homeless to be able to sleep. It's a basic necessity. And what's curious to me is when I came to Durango, I've been in Durango about 10 weeks now, and what's really curious to me is I'm driving around the city, and everywhere I go, I see mule deer everywhere in the city. They're nursing their young in the streets. They're all over the place. And I thought, what's the deal with that? Why are there so many deer in the city? And they're just all over, randomly in people's yards and doing whatever. And somebody said, oh, don't mess with the deer. And so out of my own curiosity, I looked up the city ordinances. And to my understanding, it's a misdemeanor, section 4.4, cruelty to animals, and section 4.6 talks about depriving or willfully preventing an animal from obtaining their necessary sustenance. It's food, water, and shelter. That just leaves me dumbfounded when the animals have that kind of protection in this city and we can't find a solution for the homeless. And so I'm here to appeal to you tonight that could you reconsider? I don't know where you're at with this whole thing. And I come to this the circumstance with a biblical worldview. I'm a Christian. And so Jesus himself said that the poor will always be among you. The homeless will always be among us. We can't make them go away. We can't make them stop being who they are. And so how do we come together collaboratively to care for their needs? When I was here in the spring, the camp that was up above the tech center on county land worked really well because it gave them a place of stability. And in order for people to move ahead in life and be able to obtain what they need a place of stability. So I want to invite you to reconsider working with the county on a solution. And I'll be available to stir up the faith-based community, the community at large, to be able to help participate in that. So thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kate Halleck.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Kate Halleck, and I am a resident up at West 2nd. And I've been here about 13 years, and I was here a few weeks ago as well with Katie to talk about the homelessness issue. And I first want to give credit where credit is due, that everyone plays a part in this issue, and that it has been a wild ride with what we've experienced in our community. And I look around and see people really pushing hard and trying, and we also have our homeless that are really pushing hard and trying. And so Katie is an incredible outreach worker, and I've been working alongside her for quite a while. And I first came to this issue when I worked at Local First. I really started to see it growing and expanding, and I really see that as a basic root issue of where we are economically. And I want to see us really step forward as in our leadership in both government, business, and faith-based community. No one's going to do anything if we don't do it as individuals. And so I'd like to second what Katie has said. I think that if we can be the leaders that we're called to be, to really respond to the situation. I know we have a lot on our plate, but I want to reinvigorate us to really go after what we can look for with the county, and to work together with the faith-based community and the nonprofits. I really see this community as a loving community, and I think all the rhetoric and everything that's been happening has really attacked our community character. And I just want to take a stand against that and say that we are better than that, we're bigger than that, and I'm really looking forward to the future of what we can do as a community. And just appeal to you. I'm looking forward to working with you more. I really want to see things move forward and continue to move forward. So we do have a individual from the camp who is going to be sharing his testimony next, Tyler. We felt like everybody needs a good story, an uplifting and encouraging story. So
Thank you.
Thankful for Tyler.
The next speaker, Tyler, and I'm sorry, I can't read your last name. So please come to the podium, Tyler, and tell the council your name and your address.
Hi, my name is Tyler Hillary. I live at the Hidden Forest on the other side of town at 145. I came to this town about 6 months ago, almost 7, and I was homeless. I was struggling with my birth certificate ID and all that, and I wasn't 18 yet. I was only 17. Since then, I've been able to have work. I haven't still been able to get my birth certificate or anything like that, and I've been trying to figure all that out and do schooling. From there, with that, I've had people from the church, like Katie and everything, the homeless camp itself, people in that camp, and at a soup kitchen, helped me get to where I was at today. When I first came to this town, I didn't have nothing. I had a blanket, a backpack, and the pair of clothes that I was wearing on nothing else. I slept underneath the bridge and in the parks for a week straight before I found a place to sleep in the camp. From there, I've been in all the situations with the camp and everything, and dealt with everything with them. I was able to move into a house about 2 months ago. That's how long I've been in a stable home during growing rate, schooling, and all that, and that's pretty much my testimony.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
We're moving into our next section, which is a legislative and a policy hearing. The first public hearing is a public hearing to consider an ordinance for adopting the Storm Drainage Design Criteria Manual and associated text amendments to the city's municipal code and the Land Use and Development Code. Would you introduce yourself, please, sir?
Yes.
Is anyone to speak on this one, City Manager?
Oh,
I can't see that far. No.
We're ready?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So I'm Keith Doherty. I'm the Assistant City Engineer. I work directly for Greg Boyson, the City Engineer, and underneath Kevin Hall, the Director of Community Development, and also the Assistant City Manager. I'm also here with Jenny Nikovich. She is our Civil Engineer too, and she manages the city's stormwater program. We also have our consultants from Right Water Engineers here. We have Dr. Andrew Earls, over here, he moved on me, and Hayes Lenhart. And they'll be speaking briefly for us tonight as well. But we're all here to talk to you about the Stormwater Master Plan, specifically Phase 1, the Design Criteria Manual, and the adoption process. We'd like to adopt our plan. We've talked to you about this before, but here's a brief outline of what we're going to run through. And I know there's a lot of stuff on the agenda, so I'll try and be as brief but succinct as possible. And if anything comes up that you need more clarity, feel free to interrupt me, I don't mind. We're going to start with kind of two big buckets. The general project review, just give us a history of, why do we need to update the plan, what happened in Phase 1, the public process that we went through. One of the results of that was the cost analysis and those results. And just because we have our consultants here, we'd also toss in real briefly an update to Phase 2, but we wanted to focus on the Phase 1 adoption. So that takes us into the second part of the adoption process. We went to Planning Commission, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the code changes that'll be necessary for the adoption of the plan. Some of the key implications of if we take this plan and implement it, what does that mean? And then compliance with our LUDC for changing some of our codes. So with that, I'll jump right in, kind of talk about why we needed to update the plan. And the short version is it was old. It's from 1982. Kind of referenced our old engineering standards and outdated city limits. Really just looked at the city. And we've grown a lot since 1982. And this update will kind of accomplish several things, including bringing these up to good current engineering standards that are all written in one place. It'll improve our water quality and water quantity design standards. And when I say water quantity, we're really just talking about flooding and how we manage detention and conveyance of flows. It's taken what we've always pointed to as the Urban Drainage and Flood Criteria Manual, which is a manual from the Front Range, but it's really customized that for Durango and our uniqueness here in Durango. And it's going to improve our infrastructure. and hopefully reduce our long-term maintenance costs by making sure that we design better facilities today. And lastly, it'll ensure development accounts for their impacts of what they're doing as they implement their improvements and add impervious surface to our city. So just a reminder, the project as a whole was split into 3 phases. The first phase is mainly why we're here, is to talk about the design criteria manual specific to Durango. Phase 2 is the basin hydrology and some sub-basin hydrology modeling around the city. We've started that this year, and again, we'll have Hayes talk very briefly about that. And then phase 3 was to identify infrastructure needs, which kind of looks at what infrastructure we have and what we will need, identifying CIP projects, and if we have scope and budget, potentially looking at how do we fund those type of CIP projects. That was proposed for 2019, but obviously we have some budget things to consider there as well. So rehashing phase 1, the design criteria manual, we updated kind of our small design criteria that we had into 11 full chapters. Inside those chapters includes the concepts for engineering methods and means for doing design of stormwater facilities in the city of Durango. And we're also hoping it gives us a little more consistent approach to our design and the submittals that we see across the engineering firms in the city. That's all done, and that's why we're here, to talk about that adoption. Part of the public process we went through, we wanted to make sure we kind of heard what was going on from the public and the engineers and developers. So we started posting the chapters as we drafted them. We put them on the website. We reached out to the developers, the contractors, the engineers. We said, take a look at this, give us your feedback, tell us what you think. We also included a couple of public meetings so that we could meet face-to-face, discuss these issues, get questions, get feedback. And then we continued that process of evolving the drafts of the chapters. And one of the things we heard from our public process was cost was always a concern. And how would this affect the development costs around the city? So that spurred the cost analysis. So we completed the cost analysis, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And then as we wrapped up the public process, we got the cost analysis results and kind of all our final drafts and edits, and reached out one more time to everybody and said, okay, review this one more time and give us any more feedback. So the big one was the cost analysis and the concerns related to development. And we heard also that, you know, it's not just the cost of development, but we were hoping to look at, are there any benefits? And so we did realize that there might be a benefit to engineering design costs that would reduce on average design by $4,000 a project. And we did realize there is a slight increase in construction costs, but generally it was less than 1% of the overall project cost. So that's kind of phase 1. I'll let Hayes come up really quickly and talk about phase 2 and what we've started so far this year.
Thanks, Keith. Good evening. Like Keith said, I'm Hazelyn Hart. I'm with Wright Water Engineers, and I'll be leading the charge on the phase 2 basin hydrology modeling. So what we're really doing with phase 2 is we're taking all this good information that we've developed as part of phase 1 and really updating the master plan for all of the watersheds in and around the city. We just started the analysis in July of 2018, and right now we're in the middle of a GIS data gap analysis that we're coordinating with the city. So we've got basically all of the stormwater drainage infrastructure mapped and in a GIS format, and we're going through and taking a look at all the different pipe sizes and verifying that they are the correct size of what's actually out in the field. And then we're going to take all that information, put it into a big hydrologic model, and basically model the city's stormwater infrastructure and assess its existing capacity, identify any potential concerning locations within the city where we have constrictions in pipes, where we might have flooding. And then we're also going to take that same model and we're going to take a look at the city's full build-out plan and put all of the proposed hydrology as part of the full build-out for everything within the city limits, and assess what kind of impacts those future conditions are going to have on the existing infrastructure, which will eventually lead into phase 3, so we can identify potential capital improvement projects where we have undersized pipes for, you know, full build-out conditions, and helping assess the costs of those improvements. And so right now we're targeting the end of 2018 for the initial hydrology results, and hopefully we'll see you here in maybe early 2019 to hopefully get phase 2 adopted. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Keith.
I'm just going to add one thing that I think is neat about phase 2 is that the old master plan really just looked at the city limits, and I thought it was important that we take a look outside of the municipal boundaries, since we kind of know that stormwater doesn't just stop at the edge of our city limits. So I think that's one of the big things to consider. So now onto the adoption process. We took this plan to public hearing at Planning Commission on August 27th. They unanimously recommended the approval of the plan. The only thing that really kind of came out was they requested that staff provide comments back to the submitted comments from the public, which we completed last week. So Planning Commission was generally a success, and now we're here for adoption. One of the other things we wanted to talk about were the code changes that would need to take place. We're looking at generally 3 big buckets of code that need to be changed. The first is our municipal code. Our stormwater code generally lies in Chapter 14, and there's several sections within Chapter 14 that are going to be removed. And then we are going to add a reference to the municipal code that points to the land use development code. The land use development code also will be amended. And what I mean by amended is that there are some sections of text that will be added, some that will be changed, and some that will be removed. And the LUDC is also going to have an added reference, which is going to actually point to then the master plan and say this is where you go to get your design criteria. The master plan did have some edits that we made, and we thought it was important to point out that we did change some things after the public process. And largely that was related to, as we got into this process of figuring out which code we needed to actually remove or edit or change, there was some content or some, the wording that was being removed, we wanted to make sure was included in the master plan. So we did have to add a couple little things just to make sure we didn't lose any of the intent of our code. And then just for accuracy, there are some references and effective dates, like the ordinance number and that sort of thing that we needed to make sure was consistent. So we thought it was important to call that out. Some of the key implications, I think we've talked to you about this before, but just to kind of rehash some of the concerns that we heard in the public process and what this means if we implement the plan. But we will be going with the new NOAA Atlas 14 values, which means higher rainfall or higher rainfall intensities. And that kind of goes hand in hand with our detention requirements, is that with the increased rainfall and the detention requirements are generally going up. And that was one of the concerns we'd heard. And we even kind of backed off on that a little bit just to make sure we're following the right thing for our engineering community. The number of inlets required has gone up as well. This is largely related to intersections and the need for more inlets at intersections to improve pedestrian and bike experiences there, pedestrian and bike safety. Our minimum pipe size has gone up from 12 inches to 18. This was largely related to maintenance requirements. And another thing we heard was there was concern about infill projects, these places that are already developed in dense areas, and how do we manage stormwater in those areas. So we've had some principles and policies on how do we deal with stormwater in those areas. And then lastly, one of the things that wasn't actually a change for us, but it came up in the comments, was our minor design storm event, our minor storm is the 10-year, and that's what our current code is, but we were asked to consider reducing that to a 2-year or a 5-year. And for this process, we thought it was good just to leave it as the 10-year, and it's something we could consider in a change later. So I think these are all things that we've talked to you a little bit about, and you've heard from us, but with our consultant here, we thought it'd be a good idea for them to kind of talk a little bit about the benefits of some of these things and maybe how they relate to what other municipalities are doing around the state. So I'll let Andrew talk to you for that.
Thank you, Keith. For the record, my name is Andrew Earls with Wright Water Engineers, and I'd just like to start off by saying that Hayes and I have really appreciated the opportunity to work with the City of Durango to develop this criteria manual and to continue to work on the master plan. And we love doing this type of work, and criteria are the kind of things we do all the time, and it's been great to work with city staff who have put in a huge effort to make this happen. So thank you. But I do want to just say a few comments briefly about some of these implications. And we've talked about a few things that do admittedly increase cost in some ways, generally minor ways. What I'd like to say that you have to keep in mind with this, though, is that you get benefits for that. And it comes at great benefit in a number of different ways. And one of the ones I'd like to focus on to begin with is the rainfall data. We have updated that, and that increase in rainfall intensities is what drives some of what we're seeing with the detention and with the inlets. That is really the best available data. The original version with the previous manual was based on the rainfall data was done, I believe, in 1973, which was 1 year before I was born, and I've got quite a few gray hairs in my beard. So we have the advantage of having about 45 years of additional rainfall data that was considered. So this is the real thing. This is more accurate data, it's the best available data, and it's better data than what was being relied upon before. So really, it's moving forward with the times. I can tell you that other municipalities that I work with in Colorado, both in the high country and on the Front Range, have done this too. They're moving to No Atlas 14 because everybody in the engineering and scientific community realizes that this is real data and that we better be using the best data that we have. So along with that does come increases in detention sizes and some increases in inlets. With detention, one of the major changes that comes with this manual is that we've integrated a thing that is called full spectrum detention. And that's kind of an engineering buzzword, but what it really means is that we're controlling everything from the small events that matter for water quality up to the 100-year flood event. Now, previously, when people did detention, and this is how we did it in Colorado when I started 20 years ago, you designed for a minor event and a major event. Well, the problem with that is there are a lot of events that are smaller than a minor event, which is a 10-year return period. It happens on average once every 10 years. The events that are smaller than that just rip through these detention ponds and they cause a lot of the damage that occurs to small channels. So going to this full spectrum detention, which comes at the cost of slightly greater sizes, an easier sizing methodology is going to be really good for the small channels that drain into the Animas River and Durango. It's a good thing. The second thing I wanted to mention really quickly are the infill requirements. And philosophically, in Denver and in the city where I live in Boulder and here in Durango, a lot of the development that's going to occur in the core of this city is going to be infill redevelopment. It's going to be developed in an intensity or an imperviousness that's greater than what's there today. That's how the economics of redevelopment typically work. And if we don't do something about infill development, we're really never going to make improvements in water quality. To the contrary, things are going to degrade. So really regulating the infill development, most of which occurred before there were modern water quality regulations to have any controls at all, is really a very important way to keep water quality at least where it is in Durango. And hopefully between that and the other things that we're recommending for new development, we'll actually see some improvements. But you really have to do something about infill development because otherwise things will redevelop at higher imperviousness and you'll have no controls and you will have missed the opportunity. And I can tell you that I've worked with a lot of municipalities on drainage criteria manuals. I'm currently working with Denver and Greenwood Village. In mountain towns, I've done work with the city of Aspen. I helped develop the criteria manual in Woodland Park too. And this is something that all of those entities are struggling with is the infill development. So it's not something that's unique to Durango. The other thing is that you all, and most of you probably know this, but you actually have a stormwater permit. The city has a stormwater permit from EPA. It's actually administered by the state here in Colorado, and treating that runoff and addressing water quality is a requirement of that permit. So another thing that this manual is really going to help to do is to establish criteria and ways that people can meet that permit. The city staff has to be sure that new development meets it, and we think that this criteria manual is going to give people the tools that they need to do that in an efficient, effective, and cost-effective manner. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, continuing on with the process, we understand there's criteria in our code that we have to meet so that we can update our code. I won't go through all four of them, but just generally state that we feel that we meet these criteria to update the code. And so our recommendation as staff is to adopt the storm drainage design criteria manual and the associated text amendments to the municipal code and the land use development code.
Thank you very much. Since there's no public to sign up for this, Are there questions from the council or comments?
No questions. I think both the agenda documentation and Mr. Doherty's presentations have been very clear. I do appreciate the level of effort that's had to go into this. It's, the manual itself was meant to be a one-year process at the outset, and it's now 2/3 of the way through year 2. And I did glance online at the 11 chapters and some of the content there. This is clearly a very, very important issue. Everyone knows my concerns about climate change and the fact that you are getting up to current, or at least up-to-date precipitation data is absolutely crucial for all of us going forward. And, and I also perceive some flexibility to say, okay, if subsequent events continue to accelerate in the direction that there's every reason to think they will, that we can adapt, and the city will be as well prepared as we possibly can. Mr. Doherty and I were, as well as some other staff and Utilities Commission members, were in a scenario planning workshop a few weeks ago, where we talked about extreme microburst events as well as extreme longer duration basin-wide events. And, both either that or the drought scenarios, they're breathtaking. And it is reassuring to me to know that the staff is really working hard to ensure that the city is well prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor White. Any other comments?
No?
I think go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
You go.
I certainly understand the importance of stormwater drainage for infrastructure, and I'm curious what the timeline is for phase 3 and getting out our capital improvement project needs and how that ties in with the other needs we have as a community in the city.
Yeah, so we proposed phase 3 to start in 2019. We figured this will carry over a little bit into, like Hayes was saying, we're going to try and get our kind of initial hydrology done at the end of the year. So probably carry into 2019 a little bit. We were hoping to start phase 3 in 2019, but I know there's a lot of budget decisions to be made still, and I don't think we have any promises to us that it will actually start in 2019. It may get pushed out to 2020, but it's something for us to consider, and we'll do the best we can when we have the opportunity to do it.
So 2019, 2020-ish.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I like about the city of Durango is all the planning that takes place. And with good planning, you have a good process, and then you have a good result. And so storm drains are not seen by the general public until there's a problem. And so I like the preparation and the planning that goes into this engineering feat. With that, I will look for a motion from the council.
I'll make the motion to direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance for the first reading at the next regularly scheduled city council meeting, to consider an ordinance adopting the storm drainage design criteria manual and the associated text amendments to the municipal code and land use and development code.
Second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilor White?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes. Thank you very much. We're moving into the next 8.2.2, a public hearing to consider conceptual plan development plan review of the Kreitz property development.
Isn't this the LUDC 8.1.2?
Oh, wait, I just skipped one. Sorry,
you did.
back up. My computer jumped. Okay, public hearing to consider adoption of amendment to the LUDC to allow ADUs in the EN 4, 5, and 6. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, Mark Williams, Community Development Department. This is a proposed LUDC text amendment that would allow ADUs in the EN 4, 5, and 6 zones. Right now, they're allowed in EN 1, 2, and 3, which is the old part of town, the avenues, and East Animas City. This would expand them to the Crestview, Needham areas, which is EN 4. EN 5 is Riverview plus the tree streets, so Oak Aspen, Spruce, off Florida Road. And EN6 is a little bit split up all over town. That was kind of the leftover EN district, but Hillcrest, Alavita, and some other parts on the western edge are EN6. The next three maps are more detailed maps, so I guess I won't repeat myself, but if anyone has any specific questions, I can go back to these. EN4 also includes the area up around Bennett Street in the north part of town. There's EN5 and EN6. What we're talking about when we talk about ADUs are accessory dwelling units. They're meant to be accessory to the main house. So especially in the 4, 5, and 6 areas, which are post-war neighborhoods, they look like single-family neighborhoods. They feel like single-family neighborhoods. So we want to keep them looking like single-family neighborhoods, but also allow people to have the option to have ADUs. So that's why we're proposing that if someone does have an ADU up there, it's in a basement or in the house, or it can be attached in the back. And if they do attach it, the new structure would need to resemble the existing house. In the older parts of town, EN1 to 3, a lot of most of the ADUs are detached. That's because they're on an alley system. When you have alleys, it allows easy access to the rear of the lots. So forever, which is 1881, I guess, in Durango terms, people have had garages and sheds accessed off the alleys, and so it's natural that the ADUs grew up back there in those sheds. These new neighborhoods are different. They have a different feel, so we're not proposing to allow detached ADUs, although at the Planning Commission meeting, the issue of having detached ADUs on corner lots came up, and that's something that we want to look into. We're not proposing to adopt it right now, but we want to go back, re-examine it, and along with some other ADU issues, and that's something that we definitely will look into more closely. So, when I was talking about alley access and how it affects neighborhood character, you can see clearly this is EN2, and when you have an alley on the block, everybody's got a garage. A lot of these are already ADUs. It's essentially every lot, and they're easy to access off the alley. In the post-war neighborhoods, the built environment is a lot different. Everyone has a driveway. They may have a shed in the back of the lot, but only a few even have driveways back to garages. So that's the character that's there, and we want to respect that while at the same time letting people have ADUs. And then, like I said, on the corner lots, we need to go back and look at it. We want to go slow and make sure we make a good decision when we're doing these. So that's why we're proposing to delay the corner lot decision, but not act on it. We want to approach parking a little bit differently in the 4, 5, and 6 areas. In 1, 2, and 3, where you have alleys, you can park off the alley, but also a lot of those lots are narrower, especially in the EN1, the grid neighborhood. Lots, it's not uncommon for 25-foot wide lots or even 32, 35-foot wide lots. In other neighborhoods, this is in Riverview, these lots are much, much wider, and the density is lower as well. So there's more room to park on the street, and there's a trade-off. You want to have adequate parking for your ADU. You also want to respect these green spaces. So we're proposing to say if you want to have an ADU, you might already have 3 spaces in your driveway and your garage, so that's great. But if you don't, and you live on a street that is wide enough and it's not a really busy street like a snow emergency route, then you could park on the street. So, as I said, detached ADUs are not allowed, although we're going to relook into that. If you do attach an ADU, you build a new unit for someone to rent or for a family member, at least a quarter of the exterior of that unit has to be attached to the main house. And then you need to have an additional parking space, typically. So we'll examine allowing the ADUs on corner lots. Another thing that came up at the Planning Commission meeting was there are some alleys. I think I found 3 in the EN, 2 in the EN4 and 1 in EN, I think it was EN4 also, but in the northern part of town. So about 35 houses roughly are on alleys in the EN4 zone. So we'll take a look at those as well to see if we could allow detached units, because they function the same way as the EN1, 2, and 3 areas. So if you can drive down the alley and get to your ADU, why not allow them? We'll take a look at that as well. These are the snow emergency routes where we don't want to have parking on the street. These are typically busy streets as well as snow emergency routes. So Junction Street is one of these as an example in Riverview. So probably not a good idea not to have adequate parking for an ADU in these areas. As I mentioned earlier, the balance of neighborhood character and having an ADU is important, and we think that adding some additional dimensional requirements to the EN 4, 5, and 6 zones would help us do that. The city adopted the EN standards in the end of 2005, I believe, and there were actually some additional dimensional standards proposed for EN 4 and 5. EN 6 didn't exist yet, but for EN 4 and 5, we proposed floor area ratio, which is a measure of the total area of a house on a lot, and also one-story elements, which are essentially front porches. Those didn't get passed, but we think that adding density through, or like built density through ADUs makes sense to have additional dimensional controls to keep that balance where it should be. And then another thing, we have this in EN 1, 2, and 3 for ADUs, is not to allow external staircases to access the ADU. We've been meeting for a while on ADUs. We had our public meeting in April. We posted our draft code and a questionnaire at a couple of different times over the summer and spring. We had much more than 48 responses, but not everybody registers. You can only count the people that register. So we had about 90 registered comments and meeting comments, although the actual number was probably closer to 200. And of those people who responded, at least 80% were in favor of expanding ADUs. Now that's a small sample size, but I think it's a clear indication that at least the people who are interested in this were in favor of expanding ADUs. So one issue just came up yesterday, as a matter of fact, and that's some covenants that we didn't know about don't allow ADUs. So Crestview Addition, which is, let's go back all the way up. The Crestview Addition subdivision is the lots on Crestview Drive down to, I think that's El Paso, yeah. There is a covenant that was adopted in 1950 that only single one dwelling unit is allowed on these lots. So one of the things we want to do is maybe push back adoption of this code to give us a little bit more time to digest this, as well as some of the other things I talked about, like the corner lots, and just think through that. We really didn't have a chance to respond other than to find the covenants, and they do say that. And then another change from the code that was in your packet is we originally had a 7-foot horizontal clearance and a 10-foot vertical clearance for emergency access so if fire responders need to get around the house and get to the back, that's what they thought would be ideal. There are a lot of houses that have 5-foot setbacks, so some unknown number of houses would be eliminated from potentially having ADUs. So we want to do that more on a case-by-case basis and make sure that the clearance is adequate, but not hold them to a really strict standard. And that is all the slides that I have. So in the original agenda documentation, the recommendation was to have the city attorney prepare the ordinance for reading at the next meeting. But I think that we would like to do it at the first November meeting instead, to have a chance to process some of these additional items that popped up. Thank you.
Thank you. There are some people here for the public hearing, and we would ask that you come and state your name and address and talk to the council. There's a 3-minute public participation on this for the hearing, and the city manager will give you by raising his hand, information about 30 seconds left. Michael Shave.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. My name is Michael Shave. I'm an owner resident of 2012 Highland Avenue in the Crestview Edition. I'd first like to say that for this meeting that the published legal notice was somewhat confusing. It was published on the 8th and 15th of this month, but the written comments were due by noon on the 14th. I read the notice late Saturday on the 15th. How could I respond or neighbors respond by the 14th? The legal notification seems somewhat in error. No people I spoke with and where I live in our neighborhood were aware of this meeting. And with such highly important historical decisions at stake, I would have hoped that the city would have contacted every property owner in the zones under consideration for notifying them of this meeting. This could have been easily done with our present electronic data information the city has at their disposal, or for postcards, the ones that were mailed out for the April 18th meeting. Everybody in the zones got one of these cards. So, I think it's important to have the speakers, if there's anybody else other than me, to distinguish whether they're owner residents, renters, or landlords for tonight's meeting. I am opposed to the ADUs and the Crestview additions. When my wife and I purchased the home, it was because it was a single-family neighborhood, which we wanted to live in and raise a family. Legal recorded protected covenant amendments for a subdivision state, and I quote, "No structure shall be erected, altered, or permitted to remain on any of the above described lots other than one dwelling, which may be a one-family dwelling only, not to exceed 2 stories in height, one private garage for not more than 2 cars." Crestview is a planned development with these restrictions. These are legal and need to be honored. In speaking with some residents, the ADUs, which are allowed east of 3rd Avenue, they were very disappointed that that took place. They wish they could have had more say. They were concerned with parking, noise, and privacy issues. Council speaks of sustainability. What about the sustainability of character of our neighbors in our town? Why the need for more congestion? Why are you encouraging high density? If we wanted our neighborhood to change, we could do it collectively as a neighborhood. I have a couple of emails from residents around me that weren't here. I'll be real brief with this. One is Donna Graves, who was out of town, emailed me and said that for the record, we are against ADUs in Crestview. I have Sue and Donna Hicks, another resident of the Crestview, and they say thank you for being vigilant. It seems they are being sneaky, published on the 15th when the deadline is the 14th. We are in Northern California right now. We really wish we could be at the meeting on Tuesday. We appreciate you sending us the email with the notice. Donna and I are adamantly opposed to ADUs in our neighborhood. We want to live in a neighborhood, not a crowded transient area. We do not need more cars parking on our streets. Wonder who thinks this is a good idea. Someone who wants to make money, I suppose. It seems like they don't care about our community. Thank you, Don and Sue Hicks. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Amy Brand.
Hi, I'm Amy Brand. I live at 1924 Forest Avenue in the Crestview area. I am for ADUs. I have been talking with the planning department, and he actually told me I should come. And I've been kind of under the radar with this, just waiting to see how it's going to turn out. And it's just, when I heard about this covenant, and I was like, that's it. You know, there is another way, there is another view. And it's what the ADUs do bring. I'm a single mom with 2 kids, and I do have an ADU, a non-compliant ADU that I've been working with the town for years now to try, waiting patiently for this ADU to come to be in compliance. And it has been a godsend to have somebody on the property knowing there's somebody else there. It's been a peace of mind. I did an addition on my house. I sent, and if anybody wants to ask Dan Armentano, I sent him an email, and just so you can see, I have a cedar shingled house, and when I did the addition, I put I increased the size of the driveway, which is very rare in that neighborhood. I have less cars in my yard than the person who owns the house and has 3 roommates. So it doesn't matter if you have an ADU or if you have a couple rooms for rent. You know, it just gives somebody 4 walls of their own, which how beautiful is that? Like in this day and age where rents are $2,200, I mean, it's insane. You know, to be able to be, I had a friend of mine who's a nurse stay, and, you know, she didn't want to, she worked nights, didn't need to have a bunch of roommates who were like around, you know, and it gave those people like an opportunity to be in a quiet neighborhood. Not everybody wants to live over in the urban area or wants to have 5 roommates. This is something that is a great model that has worked well in many towns. I came from Telluride. In my house, over our garage, the person, I left Telluride, but the person is still living in that. So I do believe that it can be very tastefully done. If you do want to see, I sent Dan those pictures of the situation. I know I'm opening myself up to being vulnerable to, like, you know, being non-compliant, but I need people to know that it does work, and it doesn't have to be anything but just another model that people don't want to live in apartment buildings, you know? So I'm not saying everybody's going to have the joy that I've had with it, but it has been really great, so thanks.
Thank you. These were the only 2 people signed up for the public hearing tonight, so I'm going to close the public testimony and questions by council. This is, since he's asking, I believe, would you come back and you want to postpone this until November, this decision? Is that what I'm hearing?
So the next step after council votes to approve or deny an ordinance is to have a reading and then a second reading by the city attorney. It's just a procedural step. So what we're proposing is to delay that reading until November, which will give us some time to...
What about EN 5 and 6? Your problem seems to be in EN 4. Is that what I'm hearing? Because of the 1950 covenant?
Well, there's that. You know, it's conceivable we could look at the corner lots in that time as well.
So would we even have this discussion this evening? Is that, how do you proceed from here?
Well, I think he's asking to postpone and come back in November.
No, my understanding is he's asking us to approve the amendments in principle with the understanding that they may be amended, that there may be some slight changes. There may be changes.
But would we have another public hearing at that point? Or is this the only public hearing?
This will be the only one.
This is it.
I mean, I think it's up to council. Under the proposal, this would be the only public hearing.
Okay.
What do you think, council? Councilor White?
I think that it's understood. I think certainly the testimony we've heard makes it clear that there are existing covenants that may limit the applicability of what we're talking about. Subject to that, however, I think I personally think that the standards that are being proposed are reasonable. I think they include, and I think that hasn't been specifically mentioned, but they include the requirements that we have set on ADUs everywhere in the city, that they are allowed in the city, which is one of the units must be owner occupied, which is a very significant thing. So you're not talking about increasing the possible number of people in the ADUs. I think the council is on record when we approved the comprehensive plan that in dealing with population growth and being able to enable people to sustainably use city services, increased density is a desired outcome. It's part of our housing plan, and we have been moving in this direction. We can cite the experience in the other neighborhoods, other than the fact that we've regularized some non-compliant units. There hasn't been a huge amount of construction. It's still expensive if you're going to build on an additional unit. So I think I don't expect that we're going to have a flood of scores and scores of new residents into the neighborhoods. But I think, as Ms. Brand just stated, it does provide an option. We certainly heard that testimony when we were talking about extending ADUs to EN3, that many people were saying, this is an option both for for a homeowner and for a renter. And we heard stories about school teachers and newly hired college professors and so on, for whom an ADU was an excellent housing option. And I think it is consistent with the steps that the council has been taking over the last 4 years to allow ADUs. I would be comfortable with voting this tonight with the understanding that staff does have some additional work to do, and that it might include the possibility of extending the possibility of a detached ADUs in the case of corner lots or the small, modest number of alleys. I certainly noted that comment that was made before the Planning Commission. I do think it's even if we don't get there by November for that particular element, I think it's a prudent effort, a prudent approach from staff to say, okay, that's a tweak we can do later. Given this other circumstance, later might be right away. That'd be great. But anyway, I'd be ready to move forward.
I would make a comment about covenants. This particular covenant issue did come up yesterday. Generally speaking, the covenants are private deed restrictions and are privately enforced. And we have no way of knowing, unless you did a full-blown record search of every property, what covenants are out there. We could have small pockets of covenants. So, Mark and I talked about this some today. I think that the city's position is, and always has been, and I think always will be, that the city is not in the position to enforce private covenants. We certainly don't want to encourage the violation of covenants either, but I think in this case, if it's possible, covenants get amended, covenants get revoked. So my suggestion on very short notice in looking at this is that we not let the covenant change the basic rule. The private property owner needs to deal with that covenant. There are other places in the city where there are covenants. I think Hillcrest has covenants. Those are some that we know about. This one came to Mark's attention because somebody pointed it out to him. So I think the covenant issue may turn out to be more of a notice issue to people that, hey, you may have a covenant issue here, but that's up to the homeowner, to deal with that.
They don't have a homeowners association up in Crestview, do they?
No.
Okay. That's what I always think about covenants.
Right. Well, and covenants in this case were imposed on that whole subdivision without in a quick glance at them, there's no termination date, there's no process to amend. So, I don't want to get into the issue of what it would take to do that, but I think that covenants could crop up in other places. So, again, I think that, and some with HOAs and some without.
I see.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt, please? There's one thing I should have also mentioned, which I didn't earlier, and that's a separate issue that came up with Planning Commission. And that is on some of our cul-de-sacs in the city. The city in the past has limited growth on these cul-de-sacs based on the amount of traffic that's generated. And the city was involved in a lawsuit in the 90s, sometime, at least 20 years ago, I think. And so we also need some time to think about that and how this lawsuit was specifically about subdivision, which these are not. These are not even separate units in a sense. They don't add any density to a lot because it's, you can still only have 5 unrelated people on one piece of property if you have an ADU, whereas with a subdivision, if you have 2 lots, now you could have 10 people conceivably. So that's also something that we need to think about between now and when the ordinance comes back. So,
Thank you for that. Councilor Fatine, do you have any comments?
Just a few questions, if you will. My question is about the rationale relative to the square footage maximum, which is 550 square feet, I believe. And in these particular neighborhoods, as you had these discussions, public commentary and so forth, obviously the lots are bigger, homes can be bigger. I did get a call from somebody that was advocating for those floor area ratios to apply more equivalently to a larger sized home. I just wondered if you could speak to that, Mark, and tell me what the rationale is for us not to just use the floor area ratio or your other conditional parameters instead of that maximum.
So there are a couple of things. First is that 550 square foot limitation does not apply to basements, for example. So if your basement is 900 square feet, your ADU can be 900 square feet down there. If you do a detached or a new ADU, attach a new structure onto your house, then we're going with the 550 square foot standard. And I guess we tend to approach these things pretty conservatively. 550 square feet was the result of a lot of work between the city and the neighbors 4 years ago in 2014 when we adopted it. And so that's been our standard. There's some other numbers that are floating around. One is engineering doesn't charge full price for water and sewer plant investment fees until a structure is more than 600 square feet. So, around that ballpark is sort of has that feel of not a full second unit, but something that's an accessory, and that's what it's meant to be, an accessory to the main structure and not feel like a second.
Could you imagine somebody achieving a variance?
Right now, the same standard that applied in 2014, which did not allow variances, applies to this as well, but that's what we're proposing. If that's something you want to discuss, we can discuss it.
And just comment, I'd love to encourage, appreciate that there's a delay in the next reading, and if that does give you an opportunity, I'd love to have the full reading to include the alleyways and corner lots and to have that fully resolved if that's possible. I know that may be a bit of a push, but it'd be great to do this all at once. I think there's a lot of folks out there that are waiting on the outcome of some finality here. Like you said, it was 4 years ago that we passed the first ADU allotment in the first 2 neighborhoods. It'd be nice to get those folks that are waiting to get some resolution there so that they can either get on with their project or not. And then just a question about parking. You said 3 spaces, so they'd have to have essentially, they could have 3 spaces on a driveway plus garage. Is that accurate?
A total of 3 spaces.
Total 3.
So it could be any arrangement
combination.
that works.
No tandem issue there, like if I'm parking behind somebody, I'm okay. And if
You should have at least, if you have a tandem, you can park, the 2 parking spaces for the main house could be in a tandem arrangement, but ADU parking space should be separate, so that's the only requirement.
And then the issue with the 7-foot access, the one thing that, as I was reading through all the commentary and everything, that kind of stuck out to me is to put that always in your court of having to make a decision. I always feel like that puts you guys in a position of some difficulty to make that. Is there any way to get, maybe for this final reading, I'd like to make the suggestion that we get some absolute minimum from the fire department instead of, so you have some security in knowing what you can and cannot approve. I would far approve that. I would rather have that as the circumstance, I guess, if it's possible. Okay. That was it. Those were my only questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem. Oh, you have a comment?
I just want to quickly clarify maybe expectations. I think what we'd like tonight is a nod from the council on the standards as they're presented, and then go to first reading. And I think drastically changing those standards between a hearing and first reading, such as including the alleyways, would be a little bit of a stretch as far as due process and public involvement. So that's, I would hesitate to change that magnitude between adoption and then first reading of the ordinance. So take that for what it's worth. I think it could come really quickly after and be a part of updates to the standards, but up to this point, we've said we're not going to allow detached units. They're going to be integrated, and then in this time frame to shift that, I think would be a little bit disingenuous on our part. I wouldn't feel comfortable having our staff do that, but we can promise to you to circle back quickly and do it.
Do we have to have another public hearing if we're going to approve this,
An amendment?
the change? Is that right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, and so approving it tonight would be with the standards as they're recommended. Then I think we just want to get solid on how we're going to interact with those covenants and look at traffic generation, like Mark said, on cul-de-sacs. That wouldn't change the standards. That would just be how are we going to address those situations when there's a covenant issue. So, but to change the standard between a hearing and first reading of the ordinance, I don't think would be prudent. But then again, we could come back quickly and amend it. And if I'm not right, Dirk, I'm open to your thoughts. But I just wanted to clarify expectations on that, of what we can and can't do between the
And I haven't been intimately involved in the process, obviously, so I think the representations that were made, I think it's a fair approach to say that we're not comfortable changing that because people have relied on that to date. So I think I have no issue with that approach.
Mayor Pro Tem, your comments?
Okay, yes. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the work that staff has done. I think it's been very thorough, including the public process around it and the opportunities to allow comment. We had a good number of public comments, and I would agree with our speaker suggesting that this is a good approach to addressing our lack of housing, our shortage in housing, and I would give the nod for my interest in seeing this going through. I would be very interested, though, in following up, of course, and seeing if it's going to be allowed on corner lots, detached units, as well as the alleyways for the 35 affected homes. I guess that sounds like it's going to come back in an amendment then, if you get the nod at a later time. So yeah.
I'm nodding, and I do support the corner lots. I already know homeowners who've been asking me about that, and so they are anxiously awaiting. I certainly support infill design, and because I see it in Crestview. I know it's already over by the Bennett area. It makes sense to me for homeowners, because the very special part about Durango is you have the homeowner living on the property, and that instills pride of ownership, just like it does for anyone else. So I do support infill design and the ADUs. That when we passed this in 2014, I think we were very cautious, and now we've had 4 years to see how it's working out, and we have come back with different ideas for the other areas of town. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Battine's comments reminded me of a conversation I had probably 6 months ago with an owner in Hillcrest who has de facto an apartment where his daughter, who's, has lived in as a student, but they foresees the occasion for that to be, space to be vacated and would like the opportunity to actually rent it.
Yes.
I think there are issues here, but I think there might have been an issue around the 550 square feet, which is what reminded me. And so I think understanding that staff may be re-examining that issue in the context of this neighborhood, I would just simply put that as to say, there may be similar situations where people would appreciate the opportunity.
And if I could go back to Councilor Marbury's comments, if anyone who lives on a corner lot is watching, I know everybody watches us on council night, and they want to have an integrated ADU, they can still do that.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
We have lots of options, I think, is what you're telling the community. And and they appreciate that. And I do appreciate all the public meetings and the public comments that I have read, as well as the phone calls from people. So where do we go now, folks? We need to approve this. And I do listen to Councilor Fattine's thoughts about the FAR that has come up. So I guess we'll have another chat with the planning department. So with that, I think I need to look for a motion.
I would like to ask for a recommended date for the preparing the ordinance.
Well, the proposal is the first meeting in November,
I think it's November
5th, which
Is it gonna-
by action earlier was moved to the 5th.
The 5th of November.
Right, keeping in mind that if it's not ready, we will let you know on the 5th, but that would be the target date.
So that could be continued. Okay. So I will move that we adopt the proposed LUDC text amendments to allow ADUs in EN 4, 5, and 6 zones, and direct the city attorney to prepare an enacting ordinance for the November 5th city council meeting.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Councilor White?
Yes.
Councilor Fattine?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes, and if you live in EN 4, 5, and 6, I would encourage you to go down and make an appointment with the planning department. Thank you very much. We are moving into a quasi-judicial hearing, a public hearing to consider the Escalante Village Plan Development Preliminary Plan. And the staff will present, and the applicant will be recognized.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So this is a hearing to consider the preliminary development plan for the tiny home rental park that proposed by Robert Lieb, called Escalante Village. It's back to you with 22 units on the 1.77 acre parcel, and it's located at 224 Baker Lane. The Planning Commission and City Council both reviewed this earlier this year and approved the annexation, the initial zoning, and the conceptual development plan. And last month, the Planning Commission did approve unanimously the preliminary plan. Just as a reminder, the site is down here off of Baker Lane, right across from Escalante Middle School. This is Walmart. The site's really flat, or relatively flat. The Animas River Trail runs along the western portion and then it bisects the southwestern portion of the property. We did anticipate this housing in this area back in last year in 2017 by changing the future land use map from commercial to high density residential. So these are pictures of the tiny homes that the applicant has purchased already that he plans to put into his development if it is approved, to give you an idea of just kind of the range of what he's looking at and size, as both size and style. Then this, and I think he has 6 total. You can correct me if I'm wrong. 3 things were done to address Planning Commission comments from conceptual to preliminary. They dropped the number of units in the park down 2 units.
but they increased the number of storage units. I think the Planning Commission felt they needed more storage, and that was how to get the additional space. And then they also are offering additional planter boxes that tenants can use to help do privacy screening between the units. So this is a new plan. It's very similar to the conceptual plan. Access is the same. This is an interior access road. Again, there's 2 units less. There's additional storage units. They moved the maintenance yard over close to the storage units, which made a lot of sense. They have water and sewer stubbing out to the properties to the north. They've added 2 fire hydrants. This is a retention pond over here. There's some possibility that it might actually be able to decrease in size because they were talking about using permeable pavers in this development as opposed to asphalt. They are proposing some amenities. They're going to do community garden boxes here. This space down here is an amenity area that they're going to poll the people who get the first reservations into the park as to what they would like. And then Mr. Lieb has a list of ideas that he wants people to vote on. And so it could be anything from a playground to a picnic shelter to some other ideas that he has. The other thing that they're proposing is to put a seat wall along the Animas River Trail. So they have a retaining wall going in, and they're going to put a seat on top of it, a seat wall on top of it, as an amenity to overlook the river and the trail. Other things that are happening, public improvements, they are completing this cul-de-sac here, and they're completing Baker Lane down here. This is a landscaping plan. It's not very colorful, but it shows you they are putting in a number of trees and a lot of vegetation, and so it should be very well landscaped. I think I covered all the public improvements, so I'll go on. Amenities, I talked about a number of these. They're going to have storage units, they're going to have bike racks, a garden space, that amenity space that people are going to vote on, and then the seat wall along the Animas River. They started talking design elements with us, and they are looking at using these Gabion rock systems, basket systems with tops on them. And so these are just some of the things that their designers have been working up. They're as sort of a theme to have throughout the park, and then also even for a screen for this is one of the storage units. And they plant inside of it, so this is actually a live vine that will be growing out of the wall. And this is sort of their idea of what it will look like. So this is the conceptual plan. This isn't the preliminary plan, but I wanted to show it because it gives you an idea of the green space versus where the houses are versus everything else. So no, the houses aren't exactly right and the storage units are different, but still I just wanted to kind of give you another idea of how it's going to look. Oh, I didn't mention the access road before, but this is an emergency access road. The applicants are securing easements through the 2 properties to the north, so there will be emergency access down from Baker Lane all the way up to Dominguez. And this is important for the middle school in addition to this development. So getting emergency access in this area is a big amenity or a big improvement. The code does have 3 criteria for approval of a preliminary plan. Staff has gone through these, so did the Planning Commission, and we do believe it meets all the criteria. As for fiscal impact, the city already provides water service to the area. It's also served by South Durango Sanitation District, so not the city. It's immediately adjacent to city limits, and the cost of providing services should be pretty typical. The city will realize some revenue from associated fees and some increase in tax revenues. As far as applicability to the comprehensive plan, as I stated earlier, we amended the comprehensive plan to allow housing in this area in 2017, and then also the creation of a tiny home subdivision also meets some of our specific housing objectives and policies that include providing for a variety of housing types and incentivizing the construction of small units. I knew I was going to mess that up when I started. In summary, city staff is supportive of the proposed preliminary development plan. We think it meets all the criteria of the code and of the comprehensive plan. The project is consistent with the approved conceptual development plan, and the other thing that we are doing is recommending to the City Council that we probably don't need to send this back to Planning Commission. Planning Commission agreed, and this is a finding. So we're recommending that the final plan review be delegated to the code administrator rather than requiring a formal review by the Planning Commission. So the recommendation that we're providing tonight is it's a recommendation from the Planning Commission that the City Council, by motion, approve the Escalante Village Plan Development Preliminary Development Plan with findings and conditions as reflected in the Planning Commission minutes of August 27th, delegate final plan review authority to the code administrator, and direct the mayor to sign the final plan Mylars upon completion of all the final development requirements.
Thank you. I would open the public testimony, but no one from the public except Mr. Lee signed up. So Mr. Lee, would you like to say anything to the council? This is your opportunity.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councilors, and also Chief of Police. I have to say that my son's a police chief, so I didn't acknowledge him in the room. I would hear from my son. Anyway, I'm excited about this. I didn't think I would be excited about something in my older years or later years as I have for this, but it's been the response from the citizenry in Durango with regards to what we're trying to do, something unique. On the edge of being affordable. Nothing's affordable, it seems like, anymore, but it fills that criteria to some extent. And doing something very different, unique, with one of the two properties that's left in the city of Durango that has riverfront developability, if you want to call it that. So I've taken a great deal of pride in it. I know the pictures you saw are artist renditions. I have as hopes and dreams that it looks as nice as it does in those pictures, maybe 10, 15 years from now, if I'm still around to see them. But as I said, I've really enjoyed doing the project. Vicki at the planning department has been nothing but super helpful throughout it. It's as you know, going through planning is an arduous process, but at the same time, I think we've accomplished a lot working together with them. She said we are in the act of obtaining easements through neighboring properties. The properties to the north, one of them includes Walmart. That has already been signed and recorded, so that's there. Okay, it was not an easy task, but we did it, and so the property joining myself, we have an easement through them for emergency access as well as to Dominguez Drive. So that's been accomplished. There are two things that I'd like to point out to you that we have done that since you saw this last, and Vicki alluded to them. One is the Gabion walls. That was slated, when you saw it last time, that was slated to be those prefabbed concrete blocks that you see stacked up, and they're quite nice, but something that bothered me that something could be nicer. And Vicki showed you a picture of a little Gabion wall type thing, and I saw that when I was on a bike ride up in the North Animas Valley, and I snapped a picture of it and gave it to DHM, the design consultants, and said, let's try to have a Gabion idea throughout the village. And so right now, we're going to build a sample one just to make sure we like it. But there'll be a Gabion wall with the front will be a special stone that has a special look and a texture to it, not just the rocks. And so we'll have that, through the entire area there that you see that faces the river trail. So I think it adds a nice touch to it. The first layer of that will be sitting height. So if people want to take a little rest as they're walking down the trail, they can. And then we also used it for our entry sign, the picture that she showed you. We'll incorporate that. And then I always promised Vicki we'd dress up the storage units, and you saw how we are going to do that. And so, so it's kind of had a little Gabion theme to the village, and for that we're very happy. The second one is one that we're just now in the middle of it. When I started trying to do some pricing for this, I went online and started looking at other kinds of pervious pavers. And it's interesting that just earlier tonight you had a presentation on stormwater detention. And I came across a few companies that make those things, instead out of a stone, they make them out of plastic, okay? And I thought, well, how good can that be? And actually, now I'm incredibly impressed with it for a few different reasons. One is they're stronger than stone. They have, if you build them right, you put 8 inches of washed gravel underneath it, and it goes also in the holes, the pervious holes of the unit that they have you put them on the ground and put the rocks inside of it. They're good to 50 tons per square foot compression capacity. That's huge, okay? And they have clients, this one particular company out of Houston that builds these things, they have clients that put everything, all kinds of heavy equipment operations on top of this pervious pavers on all the way through. And so my initial idea was to put that kind of product where the cars park and try to gather some of that there. After seeing how and talking, this company in Houston that builds this one product referred me to a tiny home project in North Carolina, and I talked to the gentleman that owns it, and he couldn't say enough good things about it with regards to, they get major storm events there, as right now we know. I don't know if I want to call him back today though, but anyway, he said it's performed incredibly well over just about anything. They bring tiny homes in which, weigh 15,000 pounds and drag them across this stuff, and it's held up now for 3 years without any issues at all. He has no mud issues, no dust issues. He has no issues whatsoever and would recommend it highly. And so from that, I started looking a little bit more at it. I can tell you that while I haven't talked to them, and I want to start doing that in the next couple of weeks, get a little more research on it. There's one city, it's Capitola in California, if you know where that is. That's a sister city to Santa Cruz, California, and they have their new municipal facility parking lot was 30,000 square feet. So they put all their police vehicles, all the city vehicles park on this parking lot. And I've been told, I want to verify it, but it's worked incredibly well for their thing. And this is the high-end community, Capitola. It's not. They care what something looks like, okay? Because that's the initial thing, and that's a response I got back from your staff last week with regards to doing an expanded version of it. And their pushback was on appearance. And to me, when we're looking at, and I'll back up a step. One of the things I got highly impressed with was the specifics on how much water these things can detain. They're water detention, okay? Because you have, all that reservoir underneath the gravel. It's washed gravel, so it'll hold. But, with regards to some of even here we're getting this, we heard earlier, we're starting to get more heavy rain events. I think we know why that's happening. And I've become concerned of that, and I look at this product and I say, okay, why not try to do as much of this project as I can with this? This company uses 100% recycled plastic. For every 30,000 square feet, they equate it to 300,000 empty milk cartons are being taken out of the plastic inventory to use for these things. I look at being able to put that on the ground rather than asphalt, which is not a recyclable issue, and it's an oil-based product, and it's for some of the negatives we're hearing about that. I would much rather use more of this type of product than less, even if the appearance, I think we will have in the future some major storm events. This will hold up. The product itself, the company's from Houston, but I have a son that does live in Houston, and I asked him to start checking upon it. And one reference he had that validated the company's kind of big thing. If they were the hero for Hurricane Harvey, on all their parking lots that had this product, none of them had any severe flooding. It all went into the ground and stayed there. and then drained out. So it's an interesting product. I haven't done enough research, but I would like to, ultimately see that we can use more than just the parking area. If we can, I can work with staff on that. I think they'll be open to more conversation. But to me, and it's also used at a Whole Foods. And if anybody's concerned about their appearance, it'd be Whole Foods out in front of their store. And so Whole Foods has started to use these in some of their parking lots where they have water runoff. So, I'm kind of appealing to the council for a little support on this one with staff, but at the same time, I'm open to whatever we have to do with regards to this project to make it something ultimately that we're proud of. I am also very happy to tell you from a business perspective that as of tonight, we're already halfway. This isn't going to be ready until March or April, but already it's half full. We have, people had to send in money to reserve a spot, and we're halfway there. We're not even, just in the first 2 weeks of accepting applications for reservations. So anyway, any questions?
I had one, thank
Sure.
you, and that was, where was your recycle? Is it over by the dumpster area? Your recycling?
Oh, yeah, our recycling, yeah. If you see that the cage there is next to the storage, that's wide enough for a trash can and a recycle deal. Yes.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. Were there any questions from the other counselors?
Other questions?
I just have the planning commission asked a lot of great questions, and so they answered, but I was curious just a couple things. So it's temporary, so it's on wheels.
The houses are on wheels, yes.
Could you use cinder blocks instead of wheels, or is there a reason why you have to keep the wheels?
Cinder blocks could be used. We want to keep, we're going to insist that people sign at least a 1-year lease because we want a community.
Yeah.
Best we can develop that. The wheel thing, as opposed to putting them on a foundation, we didn't want to do foundations because we didn't want permanent. A lot of them are, it's sort of, we wanted the idea that people still could take it with them, invest in it, they're going to buy it, and if their life takes them out of Durango, they can take it with them, take their equity with them. Okay? So we insist on it. If you put it permanent, it starts working with some other building codes that I don't think we can comply with.
So they are purchasing the home and renting the
Except for
space.
the 6 that you saw. Well, now it's 7. We just purchased the 7th house. But there'll be 7 that we own, and we rent the house and the space. But the rest of people are bringing their own tiny home.
They're bringing their own in.
Yeah, or they're having one built.
Interesting. And then they do their own skirting.
Yeah,
For the lots.
we're going to require skirting on front-facing tow hitches. So if they face the street, they have to be skirted, and the wheels have to be skirted. Some people, I've seen pictures of people, 2 of them, I think, that people are going to bring them here, and they already they had skirted theirs where they currently have them.
And just so I understand this model, because it's, again, great opportunity for affordable, some more housing. The rent is $50 to $750 for the lot?
No, the rent for the lot is $500.
$500.
Yes.
And then
The houses we are renting, the ones we purchase, go from either $500 to $750 a month, so you add those 2 together.
Okay. How much does one of these typically cost to build?
It all depends how nice you build them. It's like everything else. There's one in Grandview up there for sale. A builder built it. He's selling it. He's selling it for $45,000. The 6 that you saw purchased there are very high quality houses. They run mid-70s to low 90s.
And you probably have requirements on what type of homes they can bring in to your development.
We want the aesthetics. But the type doesn't matter to us because that's their thing. But we don't want junky looking ones. We don't want converted sheds. If we want something we're proud to have, and the pictures we've been sent so far of people who are bringing them, we like. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay, one more question, sorry. Can you tell me anything about the demographics of the people who have currently signed up?
Yeah, old and young.
Oh, really? Okay. Old and young.
Yeah, there's young people and then people like me.
Hey.
Well,
Yeah, it's primarily that. And, you know, I mean, tiny house with raising kids inside of them, maybe one single parent and a kid would work, but I don't know, you know, it's a small space. But, yeah, they're young starter offers, teachers and single, and there's been young couples, and then almost retired or retired folks.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
It's a very popular concept.
Yeah.
I've watched this for years across the United States.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really kind of exciting
Yeah,
that
it
you
is.
have brought this to Durango, because again, it's another opportunity, and it's been everywhere, you know, for years. Just watch Home and Garden Channel. You'll see it across the United States.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so I look forward to this. Thank you for this concept coming
Yeah.
to Durango.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
With that, I will look for a motion. I'm going to close the public testimony, and I will look for a motion from the council.
I'll make a motion to approve the Escalante Village Annexation Plan Development Preliminary Development Plan with findings and conditions as reflected in the Planning Commission minutes of August 27, 2018. Delegate final plan review authority to the code administrator and direct the mayor to sign the final plan Mylars upon completion of all final development requirements.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor Patine?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Musil?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes. Now we're at 8.2.2, a public hearing to consider the conceptual plan development plan review of the Kreitz property redevelopment at 2605 Junction.
Thank you. Mark Williams again from Community Development. So this is the conceptual PD review for the Kreitz property. It's located directly across the street from Miller Middle School. This is a lot that's a little under 2.1 acres. There's been a single-family home there for more than 40 years. It's between the Cowboy Church and St. Paul's Lutheran Church. And the applicant is here to, what he wants to do is build 10 single-family houses through the PD process. And we met with the neighbors originally back in May, because the original proposal was for 22 units. The neighbors were not thrilled about the idea, so Mark Williamson, the applicant, went back, and he now proposes 10, which complies with the city's future land use map, and the future land use and zoning allow up to 5 units per acre. This is about 4.8 units an acre. So complies with zoning, complies with future land use. Some of the improvements that would occur would be a 6-foot sidewalk along Junction Street in front of the Kreitz property. Right now, there's maybe a 3-foot sidewalk. So this is obviously a good place to have a wider sidewalk. There's a 10-foot sidewalk over here. So the more safe, big sidewalks you can get in front of schools, the better. And also some road improvements on Junction. I'll get into those in a second. But this is the future land use. These are all the low density areas, which is pretty much everything in the vicinity except for public, which is the churches and the school. And then the zoning, these are EN4 areas. In terms of density, it's similar to those areas. There is some topography on the site, although most of it is really actually not on the site. This is the Kreitz property line, and this is a pretty big bluff. So at the Planning Commission meeting, one of the neighbors who lives down here came to the meeting to say she was concerned about what's going on up here could affect her down here in terms of maybe a rock being dislodged or something like that. So Mr. Williamson has already hired a geotechnical specialist to prepare a study which will include a soils analysis for how to safely build back here, as well as safety guidelines for construction. And so our engineering department will have a copy of that plan, and our inspectors will be able to see what the applicant needs to do to make sure that nothing happens down here. But I'll show you the site plan in 1 second. 25 feet of this, the first 25 feet is the rear setback for these houses. So other than a fence, right here, there's nothing that's anticipated to be built, at least not a house. This is the first edition of the site plan, and then there's another one that's slightly different. I just wanted to show you this one because it's a little bit cleaner in terms of the lines on the page, but in the new one, you can see this road is tilted a little bit more. It's not straight up and down on the map. But we've got 10 single-family houses. There would be a amenity, open space amenity on site for the residents, a detention area because of the size of the lot. They'll have to detain and treat their water before it goes off-site. Each house would have a 2-car garage with a driveway, so parking for probably at least 4 cars. We also will have on-street parking as well here with a sidewalk and a tree lawn. And the rationale behind that is that there's no parking. Well, it's complicated, but we want to have enough parking for the residents here so they don't have to park on Junction. And as part of the process, we also want to have an offer of dedication. There are no plans to ever develop St. Paul's Lutheran Church, but if there are, and we have an offer to dedicate right away, we could loop this through, which is good for city operations. It's easier for them to plow. That way, they like to have a through road or a cul-de-sac. Because there's not enough space to have a cul-de-sac, we have a hammerhead, and this will be a private road. We don't want to have city operations maintaining a road for snow, for example, where they don't have a cul-de-sac. And I think that this has come up a couple times in the past now with Jameson Drive and with the Sunier project off 32nd Street. We're doing these infill projects, and our city standards for cul-de-sacs are really big. They're 110 feet across. And so when you start doing those, you reduce the developable area that can be dedicated towards housing or other uses. So right now, this is the best solution we have, which is acceptable to Durango Fire Protection in terms of them being able to turn their trucks around. The city can also turn its recycling and trash trucks around. It's just really the snow plowing is the big issue. This is a conceptual phase. At this phase, we're doing the 30,000-foot view is all that's really required, although the applicant has some more details than that. At the next phase, the preliminary, is when the detailed engineering gets done. Excuse me. So I think I discussed all that. So let's go back to Junction Street. There's obviously a lot going on right here. So this part of Junction Street, there's just a lot going on. It serves the north part of town, people commuting through here in the morning and in the evening. It's the access to Miller Middle School, so there are who knows how many harried parents trying to drop their kids off in the morning and pick them up in the afternoon. And there are also special events, football games, open houses, any number of special events going on at Miller. So the city's been working really closely with 9R to come up with a solution that definitely works for both of us. Child safety is the #1 priority. We obviously want to, if we can improve the child safety situation somehow and still accommodate the Kreitz development, then we consider that a win-win. So we have met, myself and Keith Doherty, our assistant city engineer, and then some other city staff members have been talking with the principal at Miller, and also Andy Burns, who works for the 9R School District, about what we can do here. One of the things we want to do is move the crosswalk here down to roughly where the entrance into the Kreitz property would be, which makes it a little bit safer situation. And on a more large scale, this is the extent of some improvements we want to do, but up to 28th Street and then down by the Cowboy Church. And then close up, what we're proposing is parking on the Miller side of the road. Right now, this is striped red for no parking, and it made sense to everyone in this city 9R meeting to have parking on this side. And then, so parking, a travel lane, a turn lane, which would be new. There's no turn lane there now, and we really think that would help facilitate both through traffic and turning traffic in here. So if someone's coming through this way, and they want to turn into, oops, too far, into the Lutheran Church, for example, they can use the turn lane. If someone's coming from the north and they want to turn left into Miller, they be able to use this turn lane, which frees up more free flow traffic through the through lane on Junction Street. One of the first things we did was require the applicants to do a traffic study. The traffic study itself didn't warrant, that's the proper traffic engineering term, warrant a turn lane. The city felt that was a good idea though, and 9R agrees, and I think the applicant's also on board with that. The traffic study and traffic engineering in general has letter grades for how efficient the traffic is. So it goes all the way from A to F. A is free flowing, you're going at the speed limit. F is stop and go. And the manual that the city uses to base its traffic decisions is called those are the AASHTO standards. And the traffic study said this is level of service D at rush hour, which is acceptable. And it's level C, which is better at the non-peak hours. So when the kids aren't being dropped off or picked up, the level of service is a C. So we'll continue to work with the school district, and we plan to have a final alignment nailed down at the preliminary plan process, which could be as soon as November, December. And when this comes back to you, you'll have a more definitive plan for improving Junction Street. So as I mentioned earlier, just to remind everyone, the applicant will be responsible for improving the sidewalk along his frontage. And the good news is there's enough right-of-way to do that. We don't require right-of-way dedication on Junction to have the turn lane and the parking and the travel lanes and the sidewalk, although the existing curb will have to be pushed back a few feet. We had 14 conditions of approval originally. Those are in your packet. I don't want to go through all of those, but I thought some of these were the important ones. The project is subject to fair share. At the next stage, we'll do a fair share proposal and see exactly what that contribution would be. A standard form is a public improvements agreement, and that's to make sure that the city gets the money to do any improvements in case the development goes bankrupt. It's done in the form of a bond or a letter of credit. The density is capped at 10 units, and this is something that came up at Planning Commission. So even though the density is still, we're proposing it to be capped at 10 units, Planning Commission added a condition of approval that up to 4 ADUs should be allowed. So that's something that you should, I think, determine if you agree with that as part of the conditions of approval tonight. There was some opposition in the neighborhood. We had a letter we received last week from one of the neighbors who was opposed to that. I mentioned earlier the soils and stability, and that's the geotechnical report, just to make sure that everything gets done safely. The offer to dedicate the right-of-way. And then on the Cowboy Church, about half of the Cowboy Church entrance is actually on the Kreitz property. So we'll have to move that entrance down a little bit. That's something that the applicant will be responsible for. It's probably 7 or 8 feet. So the recommendation of the Planning Commission was to direct the applicant to submit the preliminary plan development plan for review.
Thank you very much. I would open the public testimony, but I don't think anyone signed up to comment, so I will close the public testimony. Would the applicant like to say anything to the council?
Good evening, Mark Williamson, 177 Riverview Drive. I think Mark did a good job summarizing kind of everything I've been through in the last year with this project. So I would just welcome questions from you. I will state that like he offered, we did employ Troutner Geotech to start working on doing soil samples and addressing that hillside, but we don't think it's going to be a big issue at all because, you know, our setbacks are 25 feet minimum, you know, off that hillside. And then also the idea of restriping the road, granting another 3 feet to address the kind of traffic situation that we all know exists at Miller Middle School. And then the ADU thing came up with, I think it was Joe, right? Lewandowski at the, and he just asked me point blank whether or not I would be opposed to having ADUs on some, I think he threw out four of the lots, and I said, you know, no, I mean, we would certainly, it's, on these, there are 6,000 to 8,000 square foot city lots, and so it's just more of which ones were appropriate, you know, size-wise to accommodate an ADU, but we would certainly consider it, if not embrace it, if it presents itself, so.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
And any questions from council or comments?
I've got a couple of questions about and I'm not quite sure who should be answering this, but the one that came up to me was just saying, okay, we're going to have the extra road space in front of this property, and I perceive that the vision of what Mr. Williams presented is long-term, because at least I'm not understanding that we're asking this developer to extend that three-lane to the entire stretch going past Miller Middle School. So I was wondering, how does this look as you go from this property to south of the Cowboy Church and north to the Lutheran Church? And what does that look like to a driver and whatever? And particularly in terms of the turning access to the churches and well, the school's input is a little further up, but particularly the driveways to the churches.
So I'm not sure if I'm not answering your question, let me know, but the turn lane would start somewhere south of the Cowboy Church entrance and would continue all the way past the Kreitz property, past the school, and then up close to Virginia or 28th Street. I'm not sure if we have a final design. So Mr. Williamson would be responsible for the portion in front of his property, and then the city would restripe the other portions. And it's possible that we would remill the surface, but we need to identify funding for that. So it may just be a striping project.
So it's striping, not necessarily widening the rest of the...
It is widening on our side.
Yes, I got that.
Yeah.
Oh, you're asking, would this section need to be widened because this section is being widened?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our city engineer, or assistant city engineer, Keith, has gone out there and he's measured this at certain points, and this is the plan that he drew. So, you know, he's aware that we're not going to be getting right of way from St. Paul's Church for this project or from the Cowboy Church. So these dimensions work for the plan that he has.
Okay, so but there will be a widening of the street in front of this property.
Correct.
That's correct.
Any other questions?
This is more of an observation for the traffic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I need to clarify what I just said. What will be widened is the right-of-way to accommodate the sidewalk, because the sidewalk's going to be, it's 3 feet right now.
Yep.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so the street
sidewalk-
profile doesn't change.
Right, I'm sorry.
The sidewalk, there'll be a new sidewalk section.
Yeah, it'll be roughly double the current width. And then possibly a little retaining wall, a couple feet.
Okay. All right, is that wasn't quite clear to me.
Okay, sorry.
This has nothing to do with the applicant and his space in front of the property, but my observation, just happening to have a child that I drop off at school there every morning, is that and you may be well aware of this, but the primary issue is that the exiting from the way that 9R wants you to enter the school, which is around the back parking lot. You don't drop off in front any longer. And so you go into the back parking lot, and then everyone circulates back onto the street, and they have to take a left turn right where you have your arrow there. And it's a blind left turn because you can't see vehicles that are traveling from the right view. And also there's lots of traffic coming up at that time of day. So just the thought, I was reading through the commentary, and there was the bat signal commentary for potentially the crosswalk area. It did sort of make sense to me that as we're looking at the traffic issue there, that even a temporary light sort of situation, which just for the ingress egress for the school day really would resolve that issue pretty cleanly. The lane itself, the new turn lane also will help because people can maybe turn into the middle lane and not have to have it open both ways. But I don't know if that discussion came up or.
Are you talking about putting in a light for a traffic signal light and
I am, actually. I know that sounds completely bizarre, but at the exit to the school itself, on the back of its parking lot, some kind of signal or ability to guide traffic there, or just 9R has somebody out there directing traffic that time of day, if that would be an acceptable means there. If anybody's done it recently, it's pretty hairy. And in fact, what it causes is the parents know that it's pretty hairy, so they do everything in their power to avoid getting back there, which means that they're stopping along your no parking zone, they're dropping kids off in the middle of the road, and really, it's the applicant's property has zero impact on this. When I was reading through the comments and everything, their improvement to that is, I just think is going to have negligible impact on it. It's really the circumstance itself of the school being there, not the rest of the neighbors. So it's just a comment for what it's worth. I think it needs some traffic direction. It's not just the street or turn lanes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can address that right now, but
No,
we will meet with 9R again, and so we'll bring that up.
Cool.
It's funny, interesting that I've dropped off kids there too for many years, and though probably a little time ago from you. And I would have a big sign in front of your property lot saying, "Do not enter public," because like Councilor Patine is saying, we would take almost any ability to not go into the back and have to do that. I can easily see people trying to turn in there and then hammerhead around.
They go into the
pull out.
Cowboy Church all the time.
Oh, for sure.
That's a problem, they're always circulating there because their options are bad. Their other options are bad.
So the couple thoughts around there is a good sign for yours, and potentially some discussions with 9R about educating their families on alternative routes for dropping off. I used to kind of go to the bottom of the hill and not drive them up and just flip around down there, so that they can avoid that. I had another question. Is there going to be a bike lane in front of your development as well?
So there once was a bike lane through here.
Just recently.
Yeah, just recently.
And then we took it out at
we took it
the
out.
behest of 9R.
So it will not have.
It picks back up right around this corner, I think.
So no bike lane in front of.
Yeah,
at all.
it's just too compressed in this corridor, roughly from the edge
They'll
of
kind
the
of
school
fly
property.
over that area on their bikes, I guess, right? Okay. And then a question for Mr. Williamson. You've done some challenging projects. This appears to be yet another one. What type of housing is this going to be? Market rate housing? How big? Any idea on range? I know you're preliminary.
Yeah, I think what I submitted in my narrative was these houses will probably be in the two-car garage, but in the 1,800 to 2,200 square foot range. So by Durango standards, pretty modest size. The smallest lots are just over 6,000 square feet, and the larger ones are just over 8,000 square feet. So kind of a pocket, I think we can build an attractive pocket neighborhood, if you will, there. The topography lends itself to having, undulations in it so that, you're not going to be peering directly into your neighbors. Yeah, so I think it's, it'll be challenging. I mean, there's quite a bit of, exported material, to make the road work and so forth, but I think it'll just lend itself to, a more, interesting, neighborhood in the end. Again, I mean, we started with 22 units, so I feel like, we compromised a great deal with the neighbors many months ago. So, but I'm still, excited and optimistic about it, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
In this case, then, our ADUs would be attached, correct?
Yes, they would.
Be in 4.
Yeah, they would have to be.
Why would we limit those to 4? What's the?
So the background would be kind of based on the history of where this project started. 22 units, and then the neighbors up in arms, and then Mark coming back with 10 units instead. The traffic study was done based on the 22 units, so that level of service wouldn't be affected by adding the ADUs, but I think it's a neighborhood.
I mean, you still can't have more than 5 unrelated people. You still have that sort of measure. You still have parking standards relative to the ADUs. I mean, I just can see the first thing you're going to get is, it's great that we would add 4 ADUs to the neighborhood, and that's great, but we were just having the discussion about expanding this to other neighborhoods, and here's another neighborhood that has normal sized lots in that same area, and if I was one of the people who didn't get the 4 ADUs, I'd be like, why can't I have an ADU? And I don't have a great answer to that question right now. So I'm kind of thinking, from my perspective, unless I do understand that the neighbors probably feel that ramps it back up. But, we know, based on the numbers of ADUs that have actually been permitted over 4 years, it's something in the neighborhood of 16, or you correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, it's not over 20 in 2 neighborhoods over 4 years. And we're talking about one neighborhood of 10 units. The likelihood that it actually even has more than 4 is not high. But why restrict the neighborhood to a limitation? It creates housing, which is what we're looking for. Mr. Williamson, I'm guessing, is not opposed to that flexibility. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I would be in favor of ramping up the number of ADUs to whatever the city standards would provide based on what we just approved for the entire neighborhood. I don't see a reason not to.
I happen to agree with you. I support ADUs. I have for the last 8 years. And that's a new neighborhood, and those lots are a minimum of 6,000. Is that correct? Some are 6,000, some are 8. That's plenty of room for an integrated ADU.
It's a 550 square foot. I mean, the max is 550. We talked about that. You'd have the floor area ratio. All of the restrictions are in place.
Right. There's no vacation rentals in that project. And
No vacation rentals are allowed.
That's right.
You have to have owner occupancy.
Yeah.
Everything, complies with the rest of the neighborhoods that are right around it. I don't know why we would pick this neighborhood and say it's different.
That's a good point. There's 2 people that are nodding their head.
I have a question, I think, just in terms of, I think the timing of permitting for an ADU would be when they're submitting building plans. And so all of these, the code that we're talking about would be in place. So that's not an issue.
Shouldn't be.
I think that's true, or
In addition.
they could do it later.
Yeah, well, I mean, but I think my sense is, I think the one difference here compared to, the old existing neighborhoods where you're designing and building from scratch here, including an ADU is going to be a whole lot cheaper than it is to adding one.
Sure.
And
Yeah, sure.
particularly for a detached ADU.
Right.
So, clearly there's ample parking without worrying about being on the street. The, the only hesitation I would have is that there was concerns from neighbors about any ADUs. On the other hand, there are no immediate neighbors.
Right.
That's
There's
very
on-
It's a traffic issue more than anything else. It's not as, the only people who will be impacted by an ADU next door are the people who are themselves choosing to buy and build in this site. So
The traffic study had to-
traffic study, and the traffic study was done for the higher density.
And it had to
So-
contemplate the 5 unrelated people as well, which would have been.
Right. So I think that, we're not talking more people. We might be talking a few more cars. But actually not compared to somebody buying one of those properties and renting it. In which case you could be having, considerably more cars.
Could I ask a question on the ADU then? Could you put the picture back up with the units? I'm just concerned in knowing that we don't want any of those individuals parking on Junction Creek. And I believe that I read in the other one that if you have an ADU, you'd have 3 spaces. So if everyone had an ADU, where would they park?
Yeah, so each lot has a 2-car garage, and there's space in front of every garage door for an additional 2 cars. And there's parallel parking on both sides of the
street,
of the horizontal portion of the street, not the T portion, but the horizontal portion.
So it wouldn't block traffic.
So there's an enormous amount of parking
Oh.
on this project.
It meets the standard, but it's more than meets the standard that we were discussing earlier.
Right, and those lots can definitely hold an ADU if the person buying them wants to do that.
Correct.
I'm with you, Councilor Patine, that I think that opportunity should be there for that development.
And then one more question, do you have any other opportunities for neighborhood input then if we change this to allow ADUs for all the units?
So you would be approving the ADUs used tonight. I'm not clear if you could rescind it at the next stage or not. The next stage is the preliminary plan, so there are 2 more public hearings for this project.
So they would have the
Planning
opportunity-
Commission and City Council, right?
Okay.
So, conceivably you could vote to change that. But-
Well, I think Councilor White had a great thought there. There's no neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, there's no,
There's no
the
neighbors.
issue where, there are neighbors down the hill. And I think they were heard from at the Planning Commission.
It rolls right into EN2.
Yeah.
And so EN2 already has the possibility of ADUs.
I think our code says that the density is set at the conceptual plan phase. So I think this is probably the decision tonight.
Well, and I think the spirit of Joe's comment was, we're across the street from a school. What are the odds that a first-year teacher might rent an apartment above a garage and, live across the street? So,
It's a very good
and he
point.
asked me, I said, absolutely. I get it.
I see heads nodding. I see foreheads nodding. So I'm going to look for a motion on this with an amendment from Councilor Patine.
I'll make the motion to approve the Kreitz Conceptual Plan Development Plan and direct the applicant to submit the preliminary plan and development plan for review with the amendment that ADUs are permissible based on the new ADU code within this neighborhood for all homes.
Do we not wish to refer to all of the other conditions of approval that came from the Planning Commission? Because I was struck by the fact that this motion is phrased in the agenda documentation without reference to the conditions of approval, of which there were some, and also the ADU thing that actually came out of the Planning Commission was not a I mean, it was phrased as a recommendation to the council and not as a stated condition of approval. So I think what we're doing is accepting all of the conditions that came from the staff report and the planning commission, with the addition that that any of the lots would have the possibility of ADUs.
Okay,
So
so
moved.
just rephrase that.
You want me to do it again?
Yes, and say approve with conditions.
Approve the Kreitz conceptual plan development plan and direct the applicant to submit the preliminary plan, the development plan for review with the amendment that we would add ADUs to all homes if they met the current code, and with the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission.
Got it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Counselor Bettine?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes. And we are moving to 12.1. It's a discussion and possible action concerning a resolution changing the date of a future city council meeting. So, Mr. LeBlanc, would you like to tackle that one?
Yes, let me just get it up here.
Sure.
So we basically want to move the meeting that would normally be Tuesday, Election Day, November 6th, and make it the preceding Monday, November 5th.
Great idea. Is there a motion?
Is there a resolution, or is that just simply a motion?
Well, there is a resolution.
Resolution.
39.
39. Thank you. I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move we approve Resolution 2018-39.
Second.
Second, sorry.
Roll call.
Counselor Youssef?
Yes.
Counselor White?
Yes.
Counselor Bettine?
Yes.
Mayor Marbury?
Yes, and that effectively concludes the work agenda. We are, 13.1 is a discussion and possible action concerning, oh wait, we missed reports and actions.
Right.
Stop. Okey dokey smoky. Let's go. Who's got one?
I'll pass this evening.
All right.
Thank you.
I just want to remind everybody about the La Plata Economic Development Alliance Economic Summit, October 24th at the Sky Casino. This is sure to be a good summit. Keynote speaker, Dr. Gregory Bunch from the Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago. He's leading off the day with a discussion about strategy of leading in being a strategic leader in a volatile, let's see if I can do this, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. Certainly, I don't think I'm going to feel very stable listening to that, but hopefully when I'm done with that conversation, I'll feel very stable. At lunch, Tom Striticus, our new president of Fort Lewis College, is going to be talking about the future vision of the school. And then it's going to be followed up with a panel that includes Ala Harper, James Coleman, and Marcy Bidwell. They're going to talk about our tourist economy, major issues that they are affected by, and how they're going to try to deal with that going forward. So it should be a very good summit this year.
Counselor White.
I've got a couple of things. I think it's worth mentioning that the mayor and I, at least I wasn't there the whole time. I'm not sure if you weren't either. Both of us attended the opening of the Veterans Center a couple of weeks ago. I also, as multimodal board liaison, attended the public meeting last week on the College and Aid Safety Project. There was a very lively discussion with some diversion of opinions in the neighborhood, but the comments that were collected at that point will go into informing the engineering design for the project. And yesterday I attended the ribbon cutting for the Pueblo Community College Southwest campus at the Durango High School. And this is Suicide Prevention Month. I urge people to look at SanJuanBasinPublicHealth.org for further information and events. Coming up, I may be stealing the mayor's thunder here as library board liaison about the Steve Redding event.
Oh, go ahead.
Longtime library board chair and a member and now member emeritus is being honored by the library as the library champion of 2018. And that, unfortunately, that event conflicts with our CML regional meeting, which I think probably all of us are going to be attending. And the other thing that I need to mention, since I'm involved personally, is on Thursday, the 4th of October at 6 p.m., the Living Thrive Living Wage Coalition and actually a considerable number of other community partners are presenting Reversing Inequality with author Chuck Collins at the Fort Lewis College Ballroom at 6 p.m. That'll be followed, his presentation will be followed by a panel discussion that I've been invited to participate in and will be happily doing so.
Thank you. I'd like to announce that the main parking lot at the airport closed today and will be reopening on September the 22nd. There'll be paving going on. The trolley on October the 7th on Sunday will begin a 20-minute service route. So you can also download Ride Systems. It's an app to keep up with where the trolley is, and you'll be a happy camper. The fall cleanup is really important to me, and that's because I've been sawing tree limbs down. It begins on October the 8th. And please remember, no couches, no sinks. It's just trees and leaves and green stuff. So that's what's going to be out. On September 25th at Exit Issues at 8 o'clock at the Doubletree, I think that's the right day, I will be on the agenda talking about my favorite topic, which is the ballot. Ballots drop on October the 15th. 2 issues for your consideration. The police department, we know that that building was built around the 40s. The police department started moving in 1970. It's been remodeled. Closets have become offices. It is inefficient and ineffective. And if you love the men and women in blue, like I do, you will be voting for them for their operations and their maintenance. And that means they'll be getting out of that Cracker Jack box and having a place where they can grow, because right now, no more police officers can be hired. There's just no place to sit. So I encourage you to vote for 2A. 2A is the city ballot. Councilor White mentioned there's lots of ballots on ballot issues coming from the state. Look for 2A. The second part of 2A talks about street improvements, curbs, gutters, alleys, sidewalks, storm drains, and that's just infrastructure. After 45 meetings and 5,000 comments, this council decided to do a combination, a little sales tax and a little property tax, so no one is carrying all the burden. They used my assessed value for on the PowerPoint. So for $13 more a month, I can support the police department. And I know that you love and care about our police department. They need your help. Vote for 2A. That's a yes. And with that,
I think you said October 25th?
No, September 25th. That's Eggs and Issues, and that's at the Doubletree at 8 o'clock. Now we're going to go into 13.1, which is a discussion and possible action concerning a motion to convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing specific legal questions with the city attorney as permitted in CRS 246402-4B. Is there a motion?
I move that we convene an executive session to discuss specific legal questions with the city attorney as permitted in CRS paragraph 24-6-4024B.
I'll second.
And roll call, please.
Councilor Bateen?
Yes.
Councilor White?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Musa?
Yes?
Mayor Marbury?
Yes. And this concludes September the 18th City Council meeting. We'll see you at our next meeting on October the 2nd.